Welcome to our channel, Book by Book. Today, we are opening up a really vital blueprint. It's a detailed instruction manual for, well, for every manager, every leader, and frankly, anyone who's ever wrestled with that high-stakes, high-stress game of filling a vacancy.
Oh, for sure.
We're diving into The Effective Hiring Manager, Essential Hiring and Team Building Lessons by Mark Horstman. Came out in 2019.
And this isn't just another HR guide you put on the shelf. This is, it's a fundamental restructuring of how we should think about probably the single most costly activity a manager undertakes.
Yeah, and that stress you mentioned,
Yeah.
it's universal, right?
Absolutely. If you've managed a team, you know that feeling. The moment a seat opens up, a clock starts ticking in your head.
It feels like a time bomb.
It does. But Horstman, who co-founded Manager Tools and has coached, thousands of leaders, he argues that that intense pressure to just fill the seat, that's precisely the environment where we make the most expensive mistakes.
Right. We always frame the problem as we have too much work and not enough hands, so the solution has to be hiring someone immediately.
Of course.
But Horstman makes this incredibly compelling case that the true danger isn't the temporary drag of the vacancy itself. It's the cascading, catastrophic ripple effect of filling that seat with the wrong person.
And we're not just talking about wasted salary. That's the easy part to calculate. We're talking about ruined morale, derailed projects, and a serious, serious blow to your credibility as a leader.
Exactly. So his central thesis, and this really is the foundation for the entire book, it's something every manager should probably write on a sticky note and put on their monitor.
What is it?
Effective hiring is the single greatest long-term contribution a manager can make. It's the ultimate high-leverage activity.
Yeah. The mission then is to fundamentally change our whole approach. So moving away from that reactive, frantic seat filling.
And moving towards a strategic, disciplined process that is designed specifically to reduce risk.
That's the key, reducing risk.
So over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we are going to extract the most important components of this structured approach. We'll start with Horstman's core idea, that successful hiring is about minimizing error, not just maximizing hope.
Right. Then we'll walk through 5 really detailed lessons, and we'll use the book's specific examples and some powerful analogies to, ground the theory in real-world practice.
And finally, we'll synthesize all of this into a clear, actionable blueprint. Exactly what steps you, the manager listening, can take immediately to professionalize your hiring game and build a team that actually thrives.
Okay, let's get into it. The mindset shift first.
Part 1 is the foundation. It's the core realization that completely flips the hiring script.
Right.
When we approach a vacancy, our first instinct is to dream of the perfect candidate, right? The unicorn who's going to solve all our problems.
We've all been there.
But what does Horstman tell us is the actual practical focus? Where should our head be?
He insists the focus has to shift from aspiration to risk management. His mantra is so direct and powerful. The only thing worse than an open position is filling it with the wrong person.
And that one sentence changes everything.
It does. It means successful hiring is fundamentally about avoiding hiring mistakes. It's about building in rigor, discipline, and high standards to veto the bad, not just, wish for the perfect.
I really appreciate that framing because it forces us to be so much more critical during the evaluation process.
That's so.
Well, when we're chasing that unicorn, we tend to rationalize away minor red flags. We get emotionally invested in finding a savior for the team.
Yeah, confirmation bias kicks in.
Exactly. But if your mission is to actively look for reasons to say no, you stop seeing interviews as marketing pitches for the role and start seeing them as what they should be, rigorous vetting sessions.
That's a great point. And to support this whole avoidance mindset, Horstman identifies 3 critical pillars for the process. The first pillar is definitional rigor. You have to define your criteria rigorously, using measurable metrics before you even think about recruiting.
Before, not during.
Never during. If you define what success looks like mid-interview, you're just inviting subjectivity and bias into the process.
And the second pillar. This aligns perfectly with that avoidance strategy.
Right. During the screening and interviewing, your primary job is to look for reasons to say no, not just reasons to say yes. This means you have to probe aggressively to find verifiable evidence that a candidate will fail or that they simply lack the behavioral history needed for success.
Okay, and the third pillar.
The third one addresses the fact that selection is only half the battle.
Onboarding.
Exactly. Once you've made the right choice, you have to onboard them intentionally and successfully. If that integration process fails, even a stellar hire can be neutralized. A manager's job extends way, way past the offer acceptance.
Let's just pause on why this rigor matters so much. The book really underscores that managers often treat hiring like a transactional checklist post, interview, select, done.
Yeah, it's just a task to get off their plate.
But the cost of that complacency is, it's astronomical, and managers often fail to calculate the true hidden drain of a bad hire.
Well, the true cost isn't just the salary and benefits you paid them for 6 months. That's the obvious part. It's the cumulative negative effect that just poisons the organizational well.
So let's talk about management time.
Think about it. All the hours spent coaching that struggling hire, the performance management paperwork, the emotional energy required for those difficult conversations.
That time is stolen.
It is. It's stolen directly from strategic work, from innovation, from coaching your high performers who actually deserve your attention.
And then there's the cost to the rest of the team. A weak link doesn't just underperform in a vacuum.
No, they actively create rework for other people. Your high performers get resentful when they constantly have to cover for someone who is poorly vetted.
And that leads to burnout, lower morale across the board, and eventually the attrition of your good employees. The bad hire literally drives out the good talent.
That's the critical piece people miss. A bad hire erodes your retention strategy and, maybe most importantly, your credibility as a leader.
Absolutely.
If your team consistently sees you hire people who struggle or fail quickly, they stop trusting your judgment. They stop trusting the integrity of the whole process. Horstman makes it so clear. Getting this right isn't just about filling a seat. It's about making a fundamental investment in your team's stability and future performance.
Okay, so with that mindset established, focus on avoiding error, we can move to the foundational principles of preparation. And lesson one is deliciously counterintuitive.
It really is.
Don't hire unless you really need to.
This is the first principle, and it forces a pause that is so necessary but also so difficult for managers under pressure.
Because the universal mistake is that knee-jerk reaction. Someone left, I must replace them.
Right, and that immediately bypasses any strategic analysis. It just rushes you straight into recruitment mode, which is costly and, as we said, incredibly prone to error.
So before anyone posts a single job description, the manager needs to conduct what Horstman calls a role justification mini-audit.
Yeah, and you're basically asking, is this vacancy the actual problem, or is it a symptom of a deeper structural failure?
Okay, so what are the practical questions for that audit? What should I be asking myself?
The book gives us a few. First, is the required work actually necessary? Really, can this function be automated or eliminated or just reduced in scope?
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, is this a workload problem or is it a process problem? Could better delegation or improved technology or just a smarter workflow solve the bottleneck without a new person?
Right. And the last one.
If I delegate these tasks to my current team, will they succeed? And this is a big one, because if the current team is failing because the role itself was poorly defined, hiring a replacement without fixing that definition, well, you're just guaranteeing another failure.
Let's use a really common example.
Mm-hmm.
The manager in a fast-growing tech company who realizes all their internal processes are a total mess.
I've seen this a dozen times.
So they jump to hire an operations specialist to, quote, help with everything.
That hires, they are destined to fail. The manager completely failed to define the role.
So the existing team keeps working with ambiguous tasks, and this new operations specialist, who is supposed to help with everything, has no clear priorities, no reporting lines, no defined metrics for success.
And what happens? They burn out or they quit in 6 months because they felt lost and totally ineffective. The mistake was not the person you selected. It was hiring in the first place without clarity.
I think this lesson is so critical because managers often see this preparation time as wasted time. They feel that pressure of the vacancy.
You can clock.
Yeah. But if you take 4 weeks to rigorously define the role and do the audit versus rushing the hire and then spending 9 months managing a poor performer and then having to rehire anyway.
The math is obvious. It's a no-brainer.
It is.
Absolutely. And Horstman uses a great analogy for this. He says hiring is like planting a tree. If you skip preparing the soil, analyzing the need, defining the role, making sure the environment is ready, that tree is going to be weak or it's just going to die.
So delaying the hire until you have crystal clarity.
It drastically reduces your risk of a mismatch, and it prevents you from spending tens of thousands of dollars just to end up right back where you started with a vacancy 9 months later. Sometimes the best managerial decision you can make is to delay hiring indefinitely and just fix the underlying process issue instead.
So once that audit confirms there's a genuine need, we move to lesson 2, setting your bar high.
And this is where that avoidance mindset really meets quality control. This
Mhm.
principle is, it's often said simply, but it's so rarely followed when you're under pressure. The guiding rule is this: never hire someone just because they are acceptable.
You have to actively avoid hiring anyone who has even the slightest chance of becoming a mistake.
Exactly. If the candidate is merely okay, they are a no, period.
But that challenges our natural tendency, right? Especially when a search drags on for months. You get exhausted, you've got deadlines looming, and candidate X is, well, they're perfectly acceptable. Why do we fall into that trap?
It's the desire for immediate relief. It's a really powerful psychological driver. The manager thinks, okay, they're 80% there, I can coach the rest.
I've heard that exact phrase, I can coach them up.
We all have. But Horstman points out that the time required to coach a candidate from 80% competence to 100% excellence is often far, far greater than the time you'd save by just keeping the vacancy open for another month to find the right person.
Let's look at the financial and operational cost of that acceptable hire, because the book is very clear on this.
Yeah, that person requires continuous management intervention. If you spend just 5 extra hours a week supervising them or fixing their errors or mediating team conflict they cause,
Over 6 months, that's what? Over 120 hours of your time. Senior management time.
and that 120 hours is time you've stolen from strategic planning, from product development, from coaching your actual high performers.
So the hidden cost, the drag on the whole team, is often 2 or 3 times the person's actual salary.
Exactly. You hired them to reduce your workload, but they actually increased it, and often exponentially.
And the analogy they use here just drives the point home perfectly. Building a bridge.
Right. You don't use okay materials for a bridge. You use materials that meet incredibly high safety standards. A single weak bolt, a single hire who is just acceptable, can undermine the integrity of the entire structure.
The team is only as strong as its weakest, most underperforming link.
And this isn't just about performance, it's cultural. When your existing high-performing team sees management lowering the standards just to fill a seat quickly, it sends a terrible signal.
It says that excellence isn't truly valued here.
Exactly. Setting a high bar is fundamentally a protective mechanism. It protects your existing team from having to carry dead weight, it reduces friction, and it reinforces a culture where thoughtful decisions are paramount. High standards aren't optional, they're the defense mechanism against mediocrity.
Okay, so once we've confirmed the need and committed to high standards, the next crucial step is making sure our assessment method can actually identify those high standards.
Yes.
Which brings us to lesson 3. Behavioral criteria must triumph over vague traits or, gut feel.
And this is where we move from philosophy to the science of selection. The failure point for most managers is relying on these vague, feel-good terms to define what success looks like.
Things like proactive, a self-starter, or great communication skills.
Right, but how do you objectively measure proactive in a 90-minute chat? You really can't.
No, and that reliance on traits or just raw intuition is what allows unconscious bias to creep in. We end up hiring people we like or who remind us of ourselves, not the people who possess the verifiable behaviors that are required for the role.
The book just hammers home this golden rule of behavioral selection. The best indicator of future behavior is past behavior in a similar situation. It's that simple.
So you have to define the criteria in terms of concrete verifiable actions required for success in this specific role.
Let's break that translation down. If a manager says, we need a team member who is great at conflict resolution, that's a trait. What's the behavioral translation of that?
The behavioral criteria would be defined as something like, must have successfully mediated a disagreement between 2 key stakeholders regarding project scope or resource allocation,
Okay, more specific.
resulting in a signed agreement and a delivered project on time.
See the specificity there. It names the context, the required action mediation, and the measurable result. A signed agreement, a successful delivery.
That immediately changes the nature of the interview question.
It has to.
So instead of asking, so how do you handle conflict, which just gets you a hypothetical, pretty answer,
Right.
the interviewer is mandated to use the behavioral interviewing technique. So tell me about a time you had to mediate a disagreement between 2 key stakeholders about resource allocation.
And this is where the manager's diligence really comes in. When the candidate starts talking, you have to probe deeply for the star components: the situation, the task, the action, and the result.
So if they give you a vague answer, you have to push back. Gently, but firmly. Don't let them generalize.
Can you give an example of that pushback?
Sure. The candidate says, "Oh, I handled conflicts well in my last role." You have to follow up with, "That's helpful. Can you give me a specific example? What was the situation? What steps did you personally take? And what was the quantifiable result of that action?"
That probing process is the critical filter. Hypothetical questions let candidates describe who they wish they were. Behavioral questions force them to describe who they actually were, their verifiable actions under pressure.
It's the difference between asking for a hopeful promise and demanding verifiable proof.
It is.
And the analogy for this lesson is so helpful. Traits are like vague colors on a palette, red, blue, green. They're totally open to subjective interpretation.
But behaviors. Behaviors are the actual paint strokes on the canvas. They're the visible, concrete actions that define the artwork.
So by defining your criteria using behaviors, you drastically reduce subjectivity, you eliminate the role of gut feel, and you increase the predictability of the hire.
And crucially, this standardization ensures fairness. If everyone is being evaluated against the same set of specific, measurable behavioral outcomes, the process is inherently more objective and way less prone to hiring someone just based on their charisma or, cultural similarity.
You're hiring based on capability demonstrated through history. And that's the strongest predictor we have.
So defining the right person with behavioral criteria is vital, but without a disciplined process to actually evaluate them, all that effort is wasted.
Right. Which brings us to lesson 4, which covers the indispensable need to structure the interview process.
And discipline is absolutely non-negotiable here. Horstman maps out a very clear multi-phase funnel because the biggest trap is managers skipping steps to save time.
The moment you shortcut the process, you reintroduce massive risk.
Exactly.
Let's focus on the most common trap, skipping the phone screen.
Oh, this happens all the time.
Teams look at 5 resumes, they invite 2 people on site immediately, they spend 2 full days interviewing them. And then they realize neither candidate has the required technical depth or that their salary expectations are wildly misaligned.
And that supposed efficiency is a massive, massive drain on resources.
So Horstman prescribes a tight funnel, a rigorous resume screen, followed by a low-cost but high-value 30-minute phone screen.
And that phone screen is where you disqualify candidates who fail the most basic, non-negotiable behavioral criteria or exhibit gross misalignment in expectations. It saves hundreds of hours in on-site time and travel expenses.
Okay, so once a candidate passes that phone screen, they enter the structured in-person phase. What does that structure look like? And why does Horstman argue against common practices like panel interviews?
He is a strong advocate for sequential 90-minute one-on-one interviews.
Sequential, not a group.
Right. And the key is to assign different interviewers specific behavioral criteria to probe, so interviewer A focuses only on conflict resolution and communication history. Interviewer B focuses on technical depth and strategic thinking. This specialized focus yields deeper, higher quality data.
And he explicitly advises against panel interviews. Why is that?
Because they often lead to diffused responsibility. Everyone assumes someone else is taking detailed notes, or the group dynamic just pushes the questions towards superficiality, which reduces the depth of the behavioral probing.
So sequential one-on-ones, if they're properly structured, are just superior for data capture.
Yes. And crucially, there are 2 supporting concepts that ensure consistency and comparability. First, consistent questions. Every single candidate must be asked the same core set of behavioral questions, which are derived directly from the criteria.
Because if you ask candidate A about resilience and candidate B about leadership style, you can't objectively compare their fitness for the role.
You're comparing apples and oranges. And second, the interview results capture meeting, or the IRCM. This is non-negotiable. This meeting is where the process proves its worth. It's where subjectivity dies.
I like that. Where subjectivity dies.
It's true. The IRCM is a structured decision meeting. All the interviewers gather, and they must bring their verbatim notes, not just summaries or feelings.
Verbatim notes.
Yes. The manager then guides the group to review the hard data, the specific behaviors they observed, against the defined criteria from the job definition. Opinions are irrelevant. Only verifiable evidence matters.
But what if there's conflict? Interviewer A loved the candidate, but interviewer B found a major red flag in their conflict resolution history. How does the IRCM resolve that without just reverting to gut feel?
The structure itself resolves it. They have to return to the criteria. If the criteria states must have demonstrated X behavior and interviewer B has verbatim notes detailing a historical failure to meet X, the group has to defer to the data.
So if a single interviewer has compelling evidence that the candidate will become a mistake,
Then the avoidance principle from lesson 2 dictates the answer is no. The goal is not consensus at the expense of quality. The goal is adherence to high standards.
This just sounds like rigorous management of data.
It is. And the analogy for lesson 4 really illustrates the necessity of this diligence. Hiring is like navigating a ship.
Okay.
You've got to chart the course, that's your criteria, check the weather, screening, sail the interview, dock the offer, and then settle in onboarding. If you skip any of those checkpoints, you drastically increase the risk of a catastrophic shipwreck. Discipline ensures you reach your high-quality destination safely.
All right, now we move to the final, and maybe the most frequently overlooked lesson. Lesson 5, Onboarding Matters Plan, the first 90 days.
Yes. This is the critical gap where even the best selection process can just fall apart.
Horstman makes a really strong declaration here. He says good hiring is not over at the offer. It begins the day the person starts.
And that's so important. You've done all this work to minimize risk and maximize quality, and now you have to make sure that investment pays off. You can't just hire and hope.
I think managers often underestimate the sheer disorientation a new employee feels, even a highly experienced one.
Oh, for sure.
They're trying to absorb the culture, the unwritten rules, the political landscape, and the technical expectations all at once. If you don't provide some kind of scaffolding, they're going to struggle to gain traction.
And that struggle is a failure of management, not a failure of the employee. Bringing someone on without a clear, defined 90-day plan is basically setting them up for an increased probability of failure.
It's like starting a high-stakes race without a proper warm-up. You're just risking injury and poor performance.
Yeah.
Let's contrast the two scenarios the book uses. Scenario A, the sink-or-swim method. The manager introduces the new hire, gives them a laptop, and says, here's the wiki, go figure out what you can do. What happens then?
The new hire spends the first month feeling totally overwhelmed, not knowing who or what to prioritize, accidentally stepping on toes, and just feeling disoriented and undervalued. They eventually disengage and leave. And that represents a massive cost in time and recruitment fees that you have to spend all over again.
Okay, now contrast that with Scenario B, the structured plan.
Yeah.
What are the key elements of that preparation that really accelerate their contribution?
Preparation is everything. Before day 1, the team prepares their environment, and the key elements include 1, define first-week meetings.
So not just random introductions.
No, these are scheduled, purposeful one-on-ones with key stakeholders to define what their expectations are of the new hire.
Okay, what else?
2, clear initial tasks or small wins. You assign the new hire small, specific tasks they can complete successfully in the first 30 days. This builds their confidence and provides an immediate, measurable contribution.
Makes sense. And number 3?
A dedicated mentor or buddy. You assign a specific, non-managerial mentor who is responsible for providing cultural context and answering all the stupid questions they're afraid to ask their boss.
And crucially, the structured check-ins at 30, 60, and 90 days. These aren't just performance reviews, right? They're integration checkpoints.
Exactly. At day 30, the check-in focuses on whether the hire understands the team structure, the culture, the resources. At day 60, it shifts to whether they're hitting their initial performance metrics and navigating the workflow effectively.
And by day 90?
By day 90, the goal is independence and full contribution. And if they are failing at day 60, the manager has to intervene and correct immediately. You can't wait until it's too late.
The analogy for this really summarizes the connection perfectly. Onboarding is the bridge between the promise you made during the offer process, you will thrive here, and the reality of execution.
Right. If you skip building the bridge, or you only build half of it, the new hire has to try and jump across a massive gap just hoping they land safely.
And managers have to be responsible for building that robust bridge.
Yeah, and this leads to that powerful concluding quote for this segment. Hiring ends at the offer. Onboarding begins the day they start. The responsibility for a successful integration rests entirely on the manager's commitment to disciplined planning.
Okay, so we've covered the shift in mindset and the 5 essential lessons that transform hiring from a gamble into a predictable, repeatable process. Now, let's synthesize this into the manager's blueprint, the immediate, practical steps a listener can take based on Horstman's work, starting tomorrow.
All right, this is the application phase. We need to internalize the steps required for each part of the cycle.
Okay, step 1, pre-recruitment justification. Before you even think about creating a job description, run that role justification mini-audit. Force yourself to ask, do we genuinely need this role right now, or is this a symptom of a process failure?
Right. If I hire, will this person solve a fundamental necessary problem, or are they just going to be mopping up chaos?
Step 2, behavioral definition. Define your role relentlessly. Throw out the vague traits. Define your must-haves versus your nice-to-haves using concrete, verifiable behaviors.
Remember the paint strokes, not the colors. If you can't define it behaviorally, it is not a required criterion.
Step 3. Rigorous screening. Develop a screening rubric. Analyze resumes not just for titles, but for evidence of progression, specific accomplishments, quantitative results. Use that 30-minute phone screen to veto candidates who don't meet the absolute minimum.
Don't waste your team's on-site time on candidates who fail these basic checks. It's so disrespectful of their time.
Absolutely. Step 4. Structured interviewing and note-taking. Design the structured interview using behavioral probing, that STAR model focus. Ask every candidate the same core questions. And crucially, take verbatim notes.
If you don't take verbatim notes, you can't adhere to Lesson 2 because you can't verify the claims that were made. You're back to gut feel.
Step 5. Disciplined decision-making. Host a structured IRCM. Gather all the interviewers, force the review of the hard, documented data against the predefined criteria, and decide as a group.
And you have to resist the urge to rely on feelings or affinity or opinions. The decision must be data-driven and accountable to the high standard you set at the beginning.
Step 6. Swift and thoughtful offers. Communicate the offer promptly and clearly. When you find a quality candidate, you have to move fast, but make sure the package and communication reinforce the professionalism and clarity you've demonstrated throughout the whole process.
Speed matters, especially when you're competing for top talent.
Step 7. Map the first 90 days. The day the offer is accepted, the onboarding plan starts. Map those explicit 90-day milestones. What must they accomplish? Schedule the specific check-ins at 30, 60, and 90 days, and make them about support and course correction, not just evaluation, and assign that dedicated mentor.
And finally, Step 8, the measurement component. You have to track key hiring metrics. This includes time to fill, sure, but far more critically, you need to track the quality of hire.
Which means what exactly?
How quickly they reach full productivity, the 12-month retention rate for your new hires, and the subjective organizational fit as assessed by managers and peers. Without these numbers, you can't refine your process. You're just guessing.
Okay, let's quickly reinforce the top 5 lessons, the quick reminders of Horstman's transformative approach that you can immediately apply.
Let's do it.
Lesson 1. Don't hire just because you have a vacancy. Audit the need first.
Lesson 2. Set your hiring bar high. Actively look for reasons to say no to avoid that costly, acceptable hire.
Lesson 3. Hire for behaviors, not buzzwords. Demand verifiable evidence of past actions.
Lesson 4. Structure your hiring process. Discipline across the whole funnel is essential, especially that IRCM.
And lesson 5. The hire isn't complete until onboarding is done. Plan that first 90-day integration meticulously.
Mark Horstman's work really pulls back the curtain on the complexity of team building. It transforms hiring from, a chaotic, anxiety-driven activity into a predictable, measurable science.
And by adopting rigorous criteria, a clear behavioral focus, and these structured phases, managers can ensure significantly fewer bad hires, vastly improved team performance, and critically, a reinforcement of their own leadership credibility.
Yeah, recognizing that effective hiring is your highest leverage activity fundamentally shifts you from being a reactive seat filler to a strategic team builder.
And the result is a stronger, more resilient culture, higher retention of your top talent, and a team that is genuinely set up to thrive.
Now, here is a final thought for you, the listener, to explore immediately. It's built directly on this focus on metrics. Horstman suggests that your hiring success metrics, specifically the retention and the quality of your last 5 new hires, are perhaps the most objective assessment of your long-term leadership credibility.
That's a powerful idea.
It is. If you're struggling with poor retention of new talent, your team will question your judgment. So start tracking those numbers today. What are they saying about your leadership? And what is the highest risk hire you need to conduct in the next 6 months? Use this blueprint to eliminate the chance of failure.
And if you found this summary helpful and valuable for structuring your management toolkit, please subscribe to our channel, Book by Book, for more such helpful book summaries.
Share this discussion with other managers and leaders in your network. And like this episode. It really will motivate us to keep bringing you the best book summaries.
We'll see you next time.